History books have a way of romanticizing war. They talk about justice. They talk about freedom. They talk about the struggle for survival or the fight against tyranny. And sure, for the soldiers on the ground, for the families waiting at home, those things are very real. But if you zoom out, if you look past the flags and the speeches, you start to see a different picture. You start to see that for the last 100 years, war hasn't just been a geopolitical struggle. It has been a business model. Today, I want to tell you a story that you probably didn't learn in school. It's the story of how conflict became an industry, how bloodshed was transformed into profit, and most importantly, how the financial system we live in today was built on the back of perpetual war. And I'm warning you, once you see this, you will never look at a headline about national security the same way again. Because the reality is, the wars aren't just fought on the battlefield. They are fought in your wallet, and right now, you are the one footing the bill. To understand how this machine works, we have to go back to where modern warfare really began. 1914, the First World War. When Europe exploded into chaos, the United States didn't jump in immediately. Why would they? Europe was destroying itself. Britain, France, and Germany were burning through men and money at a rate the world had never seen before. And from across the Atlantic, American bankers saw the opportunity of a lifetime. While the trenches were filling with soldiers, Wall Street was busy filling its vaults. Banks like J.P. Morgan didn't just watch the war. They financed it. They lent billions of dollars to the British and French governments. They became the purchasing agents, funneling American steel, wheat, and ammunition into the conflict. Think about that for a second. Every time an artillery shell exploded on the Western Front, a cash register rang in New York. By 1917, American finance was so deeply invested in an Allied victory that neutrality was no longer an option. If Britain and France lost, Wall Street would have lost billions. So, when the US finally entered the war, it wasn't just to make the world safe for democracy. It was to make the world safe for creditors. This set a precedent. The line between national security and financial interest had blurred permanently. But if World War I was the pilot episode, World War II was where the system was perfected. This is where the military-industrial complex really came alive. Once again, American factories surged to life. Companies like Ford and General Motors stopped making cars for families and started making tanks for the government. And here's the genius of the scheme. The risk was removed. The government guaranteed the profits. But who paid for it? This is the part that connects directly to you. The government needed money, more money than taxes could ever provide. So they turned to the public. They sold war bonds. They used celebrities, emotional propaganda, and posters of Uncle Sam saying, "I want you," convincing ordinary citizens that lending their life savings to the government was the ultimate act of patriotism. And it worked. 85 million Americans bought in. The public financed the war, while corporations reaped the guaranteed profits. By the time the smoke cleared in 1945, the United States wasn't just a military superpower. It was the financial king of the world. The US dollar was crowned the global reserve currency. Why? Because America had all the gold and America had all the guns. It seemed like a golden age, but there was a catch. The machine that had been built, the massive factories, the defense contracts, the lobbying power, it couldn't just be turned off. Peace is bad for business when your economy is addicted to war manufacturing. So, we entered the era of the endless war. The Cold War provided the perfect excuse to keep the budgets high and the assembly lines moving. Economists even gave it a fancy name: military Keynesianism. The idea was that government spending on defense would keep the economy humming and prevent another Great Depression. But this is where the hidden cost begins to eat away at the average person. Fast forward to Vietnam. This was the turning point. The war in Vietnam was a disaster militarily, but financially, it broke the system. The government tried to have it all, a massive war abroad and massive social programs at home. They printed money to pay for it all. The spending got so out of control that the rest of the world started to doubt the US dollar. They wanted their gold back. And so, in 1971, President Richard Nixon did something that changed your life today. He closed the gold window. He essentially said, the dollar is no longer backed by gold. It's backed by us. In that moment, money became fiat. It became paper backed only by faith in the American government and its military. And what happened next? Inflation. The massive cost of war was no longer paid by gold reserves. It was paid by devaluing the currency in your pocket. The 1970s inflation wasn't an accident. It was the bill coming due for a war economy. From that point on, the connection between war and the financial system became inseparable. Look at the conflicts in the Middle East. We call it the petrodollar system for a reason. The deal was simple. Oil is sold in dollars, and the US military protects the oil. Money and war became the same thing. Then came the 21st century, the war on terror. If you want to see how the business model evolved, look at the numbers. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are estimated to have cost the United States nearly $6 trillion when you factor in long-term care for veterans and interest on the debt. $6 trillion. That number is so big, it doesn't even sound real. But think about what that money could have done. That is free college for generations. That is a completely rebuilt infrastructure. That is world-class healthcare for every citizen. Instead, that wealth was transferred. It went from the taxpayers to the shareholders of defense contractors. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Halliburton became the blue-chip stocks of the new century. Their stock prices soared while the national debt ballooned. And here's the darkest irony. America didn't win these wars in the traditional sense. Iraq fell into chaos. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disaster. But from a financial perspective, the mission was accomplished. The contracts were fulfilled. The bombs were replaced. The shareholders got paid. In this system, victory isn't the goal. The conflict itself is the goal. Because conflict burns resources, and resources need to be replaced at a profit. President Eisenhower warned us about this in 1961. He warned against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. Today, that complex is not just influencing the system. It is the system. So, why am I telling you this history lesson? Why does this matter to you, sitting there watching this video right now? It matters because you are the collateral damage. When you go to the grocery store and see prices climbing, when you look at the housing market and feel like you can't breathe, you are witnessing the side effects of this system. War is inflationary. Printing money to fund missiles devalues the money you earn from your hard work. The financial system thrives on volatility. Crises, wars, pandemics. These are opportunities for those who control the flow of money. During every major crisis of the last 20 years, we have seen the greatest transfer of wealth in history from the working class to the elites. The mechanism that was perfected in wartime deficit spending, bailouts, corporate guarantees is now used in peacetime too. You need to understand that financial literacy isn't just about knowing how to save a few bucks or which stock to buy. Real financial literacy is understanding the architecture of the world you live in. It's understanding that the invisible hand of the market is often holding a gun. We live in a world where war is normalized as a background condition of the economy. But once you see the pattern, you stop being a passive victim of it. You realize that when you hear the drums of war beating in the media, you need to ask the most important question of all. Cui bono? Cui bono? Who profits? It's usually not the soldier on the front lines. And it's certainly not you or me. It's the machinery of finance that turns tragedy into a balance sheet. History doesn't always repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. And right now, The rhyme is costing you your financial freedom. If you want to protect yourself, you have to look past the propaganda and see the money. Because if you don't understand how the game is played, you're just a pawn on the board. If this video gave you a new perspective, if it made you question the narrative even for a second, then I've done my job. Don't forget to subscribe, because on this channel, we don't just look at history, we look at who's paying for it. I'll see you in the next one.